So we've had an overview of CRMs, we had an introduction to Trello, and I showed you how I use Trello to manage my sales pipeline. Let's dig into how I use Trello to manage my buyer and seller transactions. So here is the board that I use for buyers. It's a board that I copy from a template every time I have a new buyer. Normally here where it says buyer, I would have their first and last name, and I might have either a timeline or a budget number next to it that they're looking to stay within, or sometimes I will put a specific geography. It depends on what is most important to that particular buyer. I have my first card set here is all the activities that I need to do. Well, the onboarding is all the activities I need to do before they are ready to start their search officially. And then, like my previous sales pipeline, I have my templates that I like to use and my tools. And on the buyer board, I actually do use the Dropbox plugin. I do not use the calendar plugin, so we will be talking about that. Then I have these action items, and these are any actions that I need to take before the client is ready to officially start their search. I have a template card here for all the showings that I might be doing for this particular buyer. Unfortunately, in the market that we're in now, I could have 40 or 50 cards underneath the showings before I actually have one that has an accepted offer. I have an offers list for all the properties we've made an offer on, and I have a transactions list for all the properties that we've been under contract on. And then I have a closed list for that final transaction that gets closed out. So let's dig into the onboarding process. This is what I use for the activities I do to get a person ready to start their search. I have a little bit of information here about who they are, name, telephone, email. I don't like that it's duplicate information that I also have in my lead card, and I've kind of looked at attaching the lead card to this as a link, and you can do that. You can copy and paste a link in here to another card, and when you click it, it takes you to that card, but I found that when you want to go back, there's no easy way to go back to this page without having to open everything back up. So I haven't done that. I just duplicate the information very easily. I talk about the budget they're looking for and the geography. Then I have my checklist, and I think this is the first time we've kind of looked at what the checklist looks like. So I have everything I do before I present to them. I have some of the things that I want to remember to highlight in the initial meeting. And then I have an onboarding process for the stuff after the meeting that I do with them to get them ready for their search. And I'll leave that up on the screen for a little bit so you guys can copy that as you see fit. Now, one of the nice things about Trello is as you check these off, you get a progress bar here. And that's really nice as just a visual of how much you have done and where you are in the process. If you notice here, it will also tell you you have done 3 of the activities out of 14 activities for the entire checklist. It's just a nice, quick visual representation of where you stand. If you notice over here, we've got the same menu. I've got the power-up of the Dropbox, which we'll talk about here in a minute when we get to the tools section. And then I have the labels. So the labels for this particular process that I use that I found to be the easiest is labeling whether the contract is, or the offer is, or contract transaction, however you want to put it, is under option period, if the offer has been submitted, if the offer was not accepted, if the transaction is pending, or if we withdrew our offer or withdrew from or canceled the transaction. I guess I could make another label for canceled in case I wanted to differentiate between those two. And those are kind of all the little things that I find that I need during the typical buyer transaction. So let's pop over here to the tools section. So this is the first time you've seen attachments in this series of videos as well. And what I use the tools section for are just the common documents that I seem to always have to send to buyers. You could pull this out of Dropbox when you need to, if that's the way you wanted to do it as well. I just like to have them under one particular place where I know exactly where to go to get these exact documents. I could dig through Dropbox if I want to, but I find that to be a little cumbersome. So I just have a needs assessment document that is basically a survey that I send to all my buyers that breaks down what they're looking for. I have a lender partners list of 5 or 6 lenders that I've worked with in the past that I think meet the standards that I think that they should be doing, that I will send to my potential buyers. I have a showing specialist report. So in our particular office, we have a position called a showing specialist, or a role, I would say. And if you, as an agent, don't have time or have another conflict, you can actually request that another agent show the property for you. And there's a report that they fill out and send to you that gives you great feedback on what the clients thought about the particular property. So I like to keep that in here as well. And then I actually like to send my clients a buyer net sheet. It just is a good way to prep them for what they're going to see on that final closing statement, so that they don't have sticker shock about why certain things cost X amount of money. When I make up this buyer net sheet, of course, you have to preference it, as this is just a general estimation. It's not going to be accurate, and I think that I like to make it the worst case scenario instead of the best case scenario. It just gives them a realistic thing. If you say it's going to cost them $10,000 all the way through the search, and then they get to the transaction and they're closing and it only cost them $8,000, they're happy. If it would have been the other way around, they might be a little upset with you. So that's a little bit about how I use the tools section. There's more documents you could absolutely add here. I just find that these 4 pretty much cover everything I need to do. Now, this is a new card that I've just started recently, which in real estate, we tend to send the same exact email over and over and over again. And I am not the best user when it comes to managing my inbox for email, or trying to search through old emails to find them. So instead of it doing that way, I just like to have simple templates here that I can copy and paste into my email. I've started one here for the needs assessment and lender's email that I would send to a client. I probably have 15 or 20 emails that I regularly send during a buyer transaction that I can make templates for. And what I've started to do is every time I send one of those emails, I'll copy the email. I will delete the information that is specific to that particular transaction. So I have a general email. I will put it into a text document, and I will attach it here. So that way I don't have to do it all at once. It's a thing that grows gradually, but after a couple of months, you'll have a pretty extensive list here of all the recurring emails that you send. And I just like to cut down on the work. So that's another way to be more efficient. So let's jump over here to the property address card. This is probably one of the most extensive cards I have in Trello for the amount of information that I have. You can see I have a checklist. Actually, it's multiple checklists of 76 different items that I do from the minute you submit an offer to the time you close. So do I have to track all of those in every single showing that I do? Absolutely not. I could absolutely put this card here and then create a new showing card and then add the checklist as I see fit. But on this particular board, it's not very useful for me to use that email to board or email to card settings that I showed you in the sales pipeline. And the reason is I make a different board for every transaction, which means every time I had a new client, I would have to add a new email address to my system for this particular board. Now, one thing I hadn't thought of is that I guess I could add that email address as a secondary email address when I set up the client in my contact list, and that way I would have the email to board, and that may be a good way to do it going forward if I wanted to use that function. So let's go ahead and open the property address card here. And on the back, I have showing notes. So even if I am showing a particular property, I take those showing specialist reports along with me to take notes on so I can remember what clients said about particular properties. And at the end of the day, it helps me give constructive feedback to the listing agent when I go back into the system to send them feedback about the showing. It helps prompt me on what I should remember about the property. It also helps in referencing this when you're writing an offer. And if you show 5 or 6, 7 properties a day, they tend to run together, details get lost, so I do like to keep on top of this so I can have a very good idea of what my clients actually thought. And I also put a yes or no here at the bottom on whether or not I need to run comps and write an offer, just as a quick reference. So other details that I keep track of, and this would be only if the offer is accepted and we're under contract. I like to keep the other agent's information in here. I like to keep the title company information in here, and I like to keep the lender information in here. And there's a specific reason for that. A lot of times I've found that if I'm doing multiple transactions in a short period of time and I'm the buyer's rep, I'm the buyer's agent, I may not be familiar with the title company closing escrow officer that we're working with. So I may not remember their name. So I like the fact that I can have one place to go to where I can click on their email address or their phone number from my phone and immediately call them. I don't have to scramble around for it. I don't have to dig through my contact list and try to remember a name or a company name. It's right here on this card, ready to go. I also like to track the transaction dates, the critical dates for the transaction here as well as a quick reference. Now, one of the things I do, and it is on this list somewhere, is that as soon as we go under contract, I immediately add all of these dates to my calendar, and I have it set up to where I get alerts 2 days or 1 day, depending on the date, before that is set to expire. And I make all of my dates in my calendar for 5 p.m. of that day. In different states, it will vary on when certain dates expire. In Texas, they've changed it a few times. It used to be midnight. Now it's 5 p.m., I think. For me, I just like to set it at 5 p.m. I don't want to work past 5 p.m. if I can help it. So that's when I set it for, and I set alerts for those dates. So let's go through the checklist that I have here. So I've got a lot of information here. So I have a pre-showing checklist. So everything I will do for a particular property before we go look at it. I don't always pull pricing information or comps unless I know the client is going to be seriously interested in the property beforehand. I will pull comps, so when they ask me, like, what do you think we should offer, I will have that information on hand. Now, if the market wasn't the way it was, I probably would pull comps on every single showing that I do, but I've just found that when you're showing 7, 8 properties a day, it is just a waste of time to be pulling all that information when you don't know if the client is actually going to be that interested in the home. We also have an offer checklist that I like to go through before I send the offer. All the items that I need to get together for that particular offer. I have the information that I want to pull up as well about the property and put that in my file. I've got a contract checklist that I go through. Some of them, like call the client, discuss the repair amendment. You want to attend the last 30 minutes of the inspection. You want to confirm the inspection date, all those kind of things. I have a pre-closing checklist that I go through, and I usually start this checklist, well, I actually start it during the transaction, because you can say, I always confirm that the title company has received the survey and HOA from the sellers. It's just one of those things that you don't want to have to address at the last minute. And they're obligated by the contract to deliver that information, but you just want to confirm with the title company that they've actually done that. And so this checklist is pretty extensive. I also have a checklist on here for all the documents that might be in the offer itself. Was there something about non-realty items that we put in there? Is it a mandatory HOA? Do we have a survey, the T47, inspection reports, all that kind of stuff? I like to go through here and check this off to make sure that we have it. And one of the reasons I do that is because my office requires for us to submit all that information before they will give us our authorization to close. So I like to know where I stand and what reports I have sent to my broker. And then I also have a post-transaction checklist that I go through on every transaction, and it's kind of my closing out the file / marketing information, right? So I want to put some just sold to social media. I want to take I do a small little closing gift to the seller's agent. I want to close out the file in my system. I want to deliver a closing gift if I choose to do that for a particular buyer. And then I also want to do some marketing activities here, which is add some client calls to a week out, a month out, and a year out to check up on them to see how they're doing. And usually on this one, I will also do a date to contact them about filing their homestead exemption. I find that's always a good way to reach out to people at the beginning of the year, every year. And the other thing I like to do when I reach out to them is ask them if they happen to know anybody that's going to be buying or selling a home soon. It's a great way to reach out to old clients and generate some new leads. So that's a little bit about my extensive property address showing card. And this is the same card that I use as I drag through the entire process here. I use the same exact card. So that is a great overview on how I use Trello to manage my buyer transactions.